Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1148 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. Bro, it's crazy. I am like simultaneously incredibly impressed and extremely disappointed in the God's Knights. It's a weird place to be. But full disclosure, okay? If I was consulting my hypometer regarding the God's Knights, the trajectory is not going good. But I'm also not entirely sure if I really care. But man, this is a terrible way to start a review. Overall, this chapter was incredible. It was incredibly emotional. For some obvious reasons and some less obvious. I have some things to say this week, but I'm not entirely sure where to begin, so let's just start at the beginning. So the chapter begins and we continue to follow the giant children that are captured and controlled by the God's Knights. The main character is Rania, which honestly I'm really happy about because in the last chapter when we got a rundown of all the giant children, Rania was my favorite. Not that anybody really cares, but you don't have to be really smart or really funny or really able for me to like you. My favorite people on the planet are pure and genuine. So I guess Rania kind of lived up to the hype. Gunko is using her abilities to lead Rania literally off a cliff. Meanwhile, Summers continues to talk over the Dendemushi, threatening the country of Elbaf that all of their children are gonna die if they don't do what he asks of them. Submit to their authority and destroy their schools and library. So look guys, I understand that the giants of Elbaf are in a bad situation and that you're choosing between the best of the worst options. But in my opinion, there's some things that you just don't do. Some lines you don't cross. And destroying the treasured knowledge kept safe in Elbaf is one of those things you just don't do. I think that we mentioned this some months ago, but having a legitimate and genuine hostage situation in One Piece, I feel like is something that's never happened before. And if you ask me why I think that this is the case, why it's taken so long to have a moment like this, it's because it's really difficult to navigate in the story for Oda because of One Piece's themes. Oda doesn't have his characters debate which treasure do I value more. This is a pirate story, and when it comes to treasure, the Strats protect it all. When given a choice, there is never a sacrifice, unless somebody is prepared to sacrifice their own life. So I guess an equivalent situation to this, but applied to Luffy, is destroy the Straw Hat or allow a member of the crew to die. It's kind of interesting to think about what Luffy would choose. I would guess that he would choose the crew member. But at the same time, an important aspect of the crew, like one of the rules, is that Luffy needs to count on the crew members to do their part. So in this case, when it comes to his treasure or his dream, he would need to save the hat, while believing in his Nakama enough to know that they will find a way to survive somehow. But yeah, given this hypothetical, I think it makes it more clear why Oda doesn't put Luffy in this situation. Luffy is not somebody who makes a compromise. Like, he's going to try to believe in a future in which he gets literally everything that he wants. It's kind of fundamental. Luffy would choose both, and he would succeed. But just to make sure that we're clear here, right? Assuming that Rania is equivalent to a Straw Hat crew member, which I am personally doing because she is acting like a crew member. The moment that Rania or the crew member says, hey, I got this, or hey, I'm choosing this fate, genuinely, Luffy would respect it. And I suppose part of the reason why I'm bringing up Luffy, something that is just like in the back of my mind all the time, Luffy is the sun god Nika. He is literally the giant's god, the person that they are striving to emulate. And I 100% think that this is intentional on Oda's part. He could have had Rania beg for her life, beg to be saved. And in that case, I think that Luffy saves her. Or at least saving her is much, much easier. Honestly, there's so much going on in this scene, it's difficult for me to digest. But to me, it feels like the takeaway should be how much the giants have changed. Do you guys remember when the most defining attributes of giants were that 1, they were warriors, and 2, pride mattered more than anything? So if the Giants of Elbaf's identity was as warriors, I think that part of the deal is being prepared for sacrifice. Dory and Brogy were willing to die over pride. In this case, a very small thing. But this knowledge is the pride of Elbaf. Also just their autonomy as a peoples. Giants are free. These are things worth dying for. So believe it or not, I really do think that Rania here represents what Elbaf was. She is willing to die for Elbaf's pride, all while believing that some way, somehow, she will survive. It's actually Elder Yurl here who's doing something that, in the past, I think the Giants would not have done. But yeah, these are some of the conversations that One Piece inspires that I just love. I love because it makes you think. In my opinion, society today teaches you that literally nothing is more valuable than a life. A life is priceless. But is that right or wrong? I personally do think that it's true that there are some things that are worth dying for. But we really don't want to talk about it. Honestly, I really just want to linger on this freedom thing. Is life worth living if you are not free? When it comes to making sacrifices, it's subjective, right? What somebody values and why they value it, you would have to ask them and make that judgment for yourself. But the reality is that right now, the God's Knights are asking for them to burn their library and their books. Maybe Elder Yurl makes that call, but you just have to realize, you just have to know that tomorrow they're gonna ask for something else. Choosing to not fight is choosing to be enslaved. An important concept in One Piece, and essentially the reason why Luffy is going to save the world, is because he does not have fear. Or at least he never allows fear to dictate what he will do. He does essentially what he wants nearly always, and is fully prepared to accept the consequences of that with a smile, should it go poorly. And right now the Giants are acting with respect to their fears, which I just think is a universally bad move in One Piece. But of course, a lot of this hinges on whether or not the Giants have a plan. Elder Yurl could have been lying, and he could have been trying to stall, buying precious time to figure out some way to save all the children before they burn their school. Although I do not really believe that this is the case, because as Elder Yurl said this, he was crying, which implies that no, he meant it. But either way, in hindsight, this could have been the right move. So I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. Whether or not I really love this chapter is going to depend heavily on what happens next. At the very end of the chapter, Gaban finally makes his appearance. Honestly, I haven't spent that much time talking about Scopper, despite the comments kind of wanting me to do that, just because there's nothing that I can say that you don't already know. I was just in waiting mode, and I would say that he definitely lived up to the hype. Scopper shows up and immediately cuts off Summer's arm, but that's not supposed to be a big deal because they're immortal and they just regrow, but Summers can't. So we have some hope for being able to deal with these people. And I guess we're also setting up a Scopper training arc. But I do think that it's important that Elder Yurl's decision matters. The entire moment was heavy because we feel the stakes, we feel the consequences. Regardless of whether or not they actually do it, I want to linger on this feeling. I'm enjoying the tension. Honestly, losing the school or burning the school feels to the same level as losing a friend. And I think that's kind of Oda's point, like what he was trying to accomplish. Sometimes the loss of a thing can hurt as much as the loss of a person, if you love it or you treasure it enough, and it has meaning to you. So Oda has us feeling emotional about the sacrifice that the Giants are making, and then it's immediately irrelevant, potentially, because Scopper can fight their battles for them. So honestly, what I hope happens is, as you would expect following the end of this chapter, the God's Knights and Gunko are still holding the children hostage. That has not changed. Yes, Summers is speaking to all of Elbaf, but right now it is Gunko who has Ranya on the cliff's edge. She could still jump off. I don't think the Scopper is getting there in time. So this is what I mean when I say that the Giants are effectively slaves. I want to see what happens if the God's Knights continue to press their advantage. New task for you, Giants. Kill Scopper Gaban, or Ranya's jumping off the cliff. Or I suppose the more tame version of this is convince Scopper Gaban to stop fighting, or Ranya jumps over the cliff. Either way, I want the Giants to be faced with this decision again. With the conclusion of this chapter, I just feel like they were let off a bit too easy. If Scopper really is the solution to their immediate problem. The other reason that I really like this, and I want this to happen, is we've already drawn some comparisons between what's happening here and Luffy in the past with, like, for instance, Momonosuke. Luffy will only fight for you if he knows for certain that you absolutely need it. But when it comes to the giant warriors of Elbaf, right, he's not going to fight for them, he will fight with them. They have to choose to fight. Right now, Luffy has very little reason to be here. The God's Knights are not directly his enemy, and he doesn't really care about the country of Elbaf. This is not his home. If the Giants aren't interested in protecting it and aren't interested in their own freedom, then why should Luffy care? So long as this is the choice that they are making. I just really want to see this play out. But you might say to me, nah, JB, the Struts already have a reason to care, because we have the books from Ohara. That's related to Robin, her interests, her dreams. She should care, therefore Luffy will care. So, they have a reason to fight for themselves. But Oda could absolutely twist this in a really brutal way if he wanted to. And again, I'm just secretly hoping Robin could potentially be forced to make the very same decision that Elder Yurl just made. The lives of the children or the books from Ohara. Choose. That would be a heck of a choice for Robin. I actually could not tell you which one she would choose. But if she also chooses Rania, then at that point, Luffy is handcuffed. Like, the best way to describe it is the fight is simply not worth it for everyone involved. But on the other hand, what if Robin chose Ohara? She continues fighting. Again, I just secretly hope that that's the kind of decision Robin would actually make. This is a story about pirates. Pirates don't share their meat. They don't make compromises. They protect their treasure. That is what a pirate is. And Ohara's research and legacy is Robin's treasure. So the pirate thing to do would be to choose that. But yeah, I suppose that we're dovetailing into fan fiction real fast. We're making a lot of assumptions. Like, I hope that you guys are keeping that in mind. But, going down this rabbit hole, it makes a lot of sense to me. Because you can even go back to earlier in Elbaf. Luffy wanted to free Loki. That is what he wanted to do. And he knew that the Giants did not want that. But he pursued it anyway because, pirate, it is really, really easy to think of the Straw Hats as do-good heroes, guided by their flawless morality. But every now and again, Oda just wants to remind you, Luffy didn't grow up wanting to be a Marine. He wanted to be a pirate. That entails doing what is best for him or doing what he wants and not necessarily always what other people want, depending. But yeah, I suppose what I'm saying is it would not shock me if Robin chose Ohara over the Giants. And frankly, as a pirate, I think that is the decision that she should make. This is how, in my opinion, Elbaf carves out its own identity. It becomes an arc worth remembering that is distinct from all of the others. On one hand, Luffy is not going to fight for people who are not prepared to fight for themselves. It is not his responsibility to be the hero. And on the other hand, we have great potential here for the Straw Hats and the Giants to become enemies, which is frankly something Oda has already set up in this arc. Luffy has freed Loki and is healing him. They kinda already knew that if they took Loki back to the village, the Giants would feel a certain way about that. So what we've cultivated here is a means for these Straw Hats to act more like pirates than we have ever seen before. Because I doubt they can just leave. There's a treasure here that they want. So if the Giants are really gonna let themselves become slaves to the world government, then Luffy may have to kick their butt and kind of sort of make himself the king of this land by default. Be a Yonko. This is my territory. But anyway, I hope that this tangent didn't bother you. Obviously, we'll see what Oda does. I just wanted to communicate what about this has me really excited, potentially. What this hypothetical reminds me most of is it reminds me of Whiskey Peak, which is fitting because we had an interaction with Luffy and Zoro earlier in the arc where they were butting heads, and that also reminded me most of Whiskey Peak. So Oda might be intentionally paralleling. But kind of like here in Elbaf, the agents of Baroque Works were not bad people, and Luffy did befriend them. But at the same time, they were slaves to their overlord, Crocodile. And obviously, a very important character in all of this was Vivi. So they needed to attack the Straw Hats to find out. Then after all of this, Vivi decided to fight with the Straw Hats because they made her believe. Also, another really interesting parallel between Whiskey Peak and Elbaf is the Straw Hats, specifically Nami, tried to blackmail and extort Alabasta. She told Igaram, yes, we will save your princess and your country, but it will cost you 1 billion berries. All of this is here to remind you of why the Straw Hats do what they do. But anyway, let's switch gears and talk about Elder Yurl. A theory that I made a few months ago is that essentially Elder Yurl was responsible for killing King Harold and that he might have betrayed the country of Elbaf. Now at the time we didn't know Elder Yurl too well, and we've gotten to know him much better. But despite the fact that he is incredibly timid as a person, as more time goes by, I am more convinced that this theory is true. I feel like I say this in pretty much every single chapter review, but Oda is a paralleling god. And I really think that what has happened in this chapter is a recreation of what already happened in the past, give or take. Did anyone else find it strange that the God's Knights specifically asked for Elder Yurl to make a decision for the entire village? I mean, on one hand, yes, Elder Yurl is the de facto leader because they currently do not have a king. But at the same time, they should choose him with at least some knowledge of the decision that he's going to make. But yeah, I suppose I'll just cut to the chase. Right now, Elder Yurl is making a hard decision, choosing between two bad options. Through door number 1, as Rania rightly points out, you have the pride of Elbaf, something the entire country loves and would greatly miss if it were gone. But also kind of low-key something that Elder Yurl doesn't really care about. So if you're not aware, I'm talking about the school and the library and stuff, and it's easy to miss this because Elder Yurl seems like a genuinely nice old man. But if you go all the way back to Big Mom's flashback, Elder Yurl and Elder Yurl are talking about basically how much they value Elbaf as a country of warriors. Mother Carmel is expressing her ideas for the future of Elbaf, and Elder Yurl's just kind of like, yeah, but. He doesn't hate it, but he doesn't love it, and it seems like he doesn't want Elbaf to lose its identity. So I want to make sure that I'm very clear here, because Elder Yurl is emotional when he tells the giants to go burn the school. My opinion of Elder Yurl is that he is not evil, and he cares about what everybody else thinks. But at the same time, Oda has laid clues here or there throughout the story that Elder Yurl does not love what Elbaf has become. Another one of these came from Ripley, where she was talking about how King Harold often argued with the old giants, which would obviously include Elder Yurl. So then you have door number 2, or choice number 2, which is something that Elder Yurl genuinely loves and genuinely wants to protect. In this case, Rania. And there's also this double-edged sword of, even if you choose Rania, you really haven't saved the country. Things will continue down the path that you do not want. So you can see why this is a tough decision, but you can also understand why Elder Yurl chose Rania. Right now, I personally think that it's debatable whether or not Elder Yurl believes that the library in the school is worth dying for. So if you're curious for the full theory video that Elder Yurl betrayed Elbaf, I'll go ahead and link it in the description, but we're going to recontextualize all of this to the events that led to King Harold's death, based on my theory. But the short story here is I think that Elder Yurl knew and found out somehow that King Harold had a relationship with or was working with the world government. And I also think that Elder Yurl actually believes in Loki as the sun god and not King Harold. I think that he believes that Elbaf is going down the wrong path. And as a side note, I now 100% think that Elder Yurl is Mosa, Loki's quote-unquote friend that talks to him through the Dinden Mushi sometimes. But because of all this, Elder Yurl might have had a very tough decision. You have the treasure of Elbaf, the pride of Elbaf, the person that the entire country believes in. A person that would be greatly missed if he were gone, and can't be replaced. Harold is effectively the library in the school. Also, the library in the school is his ideology. That's what he stood for. Then pitted against the sacrifice of King Harold, you have the entirety of Elbaf in all of the giants. But I guess to phrase this in a more profound way, the future of the children. You can pretty easily argue that the future that Harold was trying to create endangers the country of Elbaf. It'll be okay while warriors are still around, but eventually the old guard will die, and the children will be helpless. But yeah, if you can't tell, we're talking about Elder Yurl's fears. Very relevant to this arc. So I guess the decision might have boiled down to what the entire country values versus what Elder Yurl values. Opposing philosophy of profound importance. And again, don't forget that I think that Elder Yurl believes Loki to literally be the sun god. He believes that that kid is going to be the one that saves the entire country and leads them to the promised land. There is absolutely a reason that Oda clarified that some of the giants believe Nika to be a god of destruction. And the guy who fits that description is Loki. I suppose it is still just a theory, but if Elder Yurl really is Mosa, and they have very similar demeanors and energy, right? Then Mosa is going to Loki for guidance, which is something like communing with God. That Dinden Mushi might as well be praying. He's looking to God for answers. And so just honestly, I do think that he chose the children's future over King Harold's life, and was somehow involved in King Harold's death. So you gotta admit, we're kind of recreating the scenario that I made up a few months ago. But to continue my thought, right, if we're speculating that Elder Yurl feared the future of the entire country of Elbaf because of Harold's leadership, and was responsible in his death because of that, what exactly did King Harold's death accomplish? At the very most, not much. And at the very least, at least from this hypothetical Elder Yurl perspective, it did damage. The way that it could make sense to me is that Elder Yurl believed that if King Harold died, he could no longer be the sun god. Logically, right? The sun god wouldn't just die. And so if he died, then his words would weigh less. And perhaps the country as a whole would need to reevaluate what they think about the future. But what actually happened following King Harold's death is the country still continued to follow his leadership. They did not elect a new king. In fact, they imprisoned and shackled Loki eventually. Basically, there's a lot of similarities here with Elder Yurl choosing Ranya right now. That is not going to solve their problem. In my opinion, not much is going to change. Everyone is still in danger. And within all of this, there's a level of irony, because the one acting most like a warrior right now is Ranya. And you can even make an argument that this helped inspire Elder Yurl even further to choose her, simply because she represents the future that he wants. She has to survive. And you could even say the same thing potentially of King Harold, depending on who he actually is when we fully get to know him. If he is not evil and corrupt, what he is doing is incredibly brave. He is not letting fear dictate his path or what he believes. But anyway, I don't want to spend all day on this. I just wanted to make sure that I gave you an update on that theory, my thoughts on it, because the chapters have been focusing a little bit on Elder Yurl. And I think that something is here. But I suppose while we're here talking about old theories, another theory that we talked a lot about in the past is the idea that Lewis Arnott's warning has something to do with the country of Elbaf having an effect on people who visit it. I actually don't think that I made a standalone video for this. I think that this was exclusively contained in chapter reviews, so there's no great place to go and find it. I apologize for that if you're lost. But the idea was something like the country of Elbaf makes people who visit and eat the food there, drink the booze there, makes them aggressive. Basically, you can easily get consumed by your desires or your dreams here, and that could make you irritable. I actually do think at some point I will make the full theory video on that, because I don't want to go through all the evidence again, but just basically some interactions with the Strahats, they just seem like they're acting weird to me earlier in the arc. And frankly, Lewis Arnott's warning has to be about something. That is a Chekhov's gun. It needs to go somewhere, and it's not entirely clear where that is right now. But over the last several chapters, I've been pretty quiet about the theory because I'm not certain if the arc is heading in that direction or not. At least until this chapter. Robin explicitly said in this chapter that she is having difficulty controlling her emotions. This is the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Even when Robin gave herself up to CP9, she didn't say things like this. Even in some of the most tense situations, Robin is unflappable. For Star Trek fans out there, she's freaking T'Pol. Essentially everything that she does is logical and reasoned. So her saying this and acting this way is just unusual, it's weird. And I understand that you can justify it because of the circumstances that we're in relating to O'Hara, the research, Saul is here. There's a lot of excuses, but there are a lot of excuses for a lot of other things as well. So I just want to say that this theory is still on my mind. And if you want another potentially weird example from the same chapter, you have Frankie. This is speculative because we can't actually see what Frankie is doing, but he has his hand held up, almost like he's reading some sort of markings on the tree like we know that he was doing prior. Or perhaps he's investigating the science building that they found a few chapters ago. Just the same as everyone else in Elbaf, they are listening to Summer's speech, and Ripley, looking concerned, says, "Frankie, I'll join in too." And Frankie says, "Of course, do what needs to be done." So the way that I interpret these panels is that while this country is clearly in danger and Ripley is leaving, Frankie is staying behind to investigate his interest, which just feels off to me. This is translated a bit different in the TCB translation, but the TCB translation just doesn't make any sense to me, because Ripley is heading one way while Frankie is staying behind. So I kind of think that they got it wrong. But I suppose that's justifiable, because they're literally listening to Summer's speech. Ripley is definitely leaving to go fight for the children. Frankie staying behind just doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem like something he would do. But yeah, for this theory, I'm still not dying on the hill. But if Oda's gonna continue to give me things to question, I guess I'll continue to bring it up. But anyway, I mentioned at the beginning of this review that I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the God's Knights, that on one hand they are impressive, and on the other hand they're very disappointing. Full disclosure, I have an entire theory video about this that's gonna come out probably Monday, so I don't really want to spill the beans here. I have a really good theory as to why they are immortal and how you would potentially do damage to them. But what I will say is, right now, I'm really skeptical that the God's Knights can use or commonly use any form of Haki. And yes, this could potentially make a lot of sense. But the truth is that we have not seen them use armament, and we don't know that they are using observation. Certainly for Summers, he doesn't seem to be utilizing it at all. He couldn't sense that Robin and Chopper were in Saul's hair. He couldn't sense Scopper Gaban coming until after he lost his arm. And at the very least, they seem to have no reason to use armament because of their regeneration. So if Scopper Gaban has some way to actually damage them and prevent their regeneration, they could just be scrubs. Genuinely. And I would have to say that I would be a little bit disappointed by that. Not that I want them to be the strongest characters in the verse, but I definitely don't want Scopper Gaban just to chop Summers into little tiny pieces and, it's that easy. But for now, I'm gonna hold my tongue. Look forward to my theory video. I think that it has the potential to blow your mind with how much it makes sense. While I don't think that the God's Knights have crazy Haki, potentially they don't have Haki at all. I think that they utilize a couple other more obscured powers that will probably end up becoming a big deal in the endgame, and could be Haki adjacent. But anyway guys, this was an incredibly entertaining chapter of One Piece. Yes, it has some potential to disappoint me depending on what happens, but it has a lot of potential to blow my mind as well. So I guess we gotta wait and see. But I absolutely felt the emotions of this chapter. Rania, best child. Her speech and her mentality juxtaposed with Robin, it hit hard. Because Robin had her moment of self-sacrifice as well. Don't think that Oda doesn't know. And the Giants bickering about what is more valuable is just the kind of thing that I like. But as always, I'm curious as to what you guys think, whether you know something from the chapter that I might have missed, just share your thoughts. If you're interested, check out my book, The Booms, link is in the description. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad. And as always guys, have a wonderful day.